start reading. So, I'm reading from the King James Version of the book of Acts in the Holy Bible, right? Chapter 27. Now, I was going to try to, break this down and not read the entire chapter because it's 44 verses, but it's a whole story, and I want to give the whole story. Okay. So, chapter 27, we have Paul. It says, and when it was determined that we should sail into Italy, they delivered Paul and certain other prisoners unto one named Julius, a centurion of Augustus's band. And entering into a ship of Andromaeum, we launched, meaning to sail by the coasts of Asia, one Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica, being with us. And the next day we touched at Sidon, and Julius courteously entreated Paul and gave him liberty to go unto his friends and to refresh himself. And when we had launched from thence, we sailed under Cyprus, because the winds were contrary. And when we had sailed over the sea of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came unto Myra, a city of Lycia. And there the centurion found a ship of Alexandria sailing into Italy, and he put us therein. And when we had sailed slowly many days, and scarce were come over against Cnidus, the wind was not suffering us. We sailed under Crete over against Salome, and hardly passing it, coming unto a place which is called the Fair Havens, nigh whereunto the city of Lasea. Now when much time was spent, and when sailing was now dangerous, because the fast was already past, Paul admonished them, and said unto them, Sirs, I perceive that this voyage will be with hurt and with much damage, not only of the lading and ship, but also of our lives. Nevertheless the centurion believed the master and owner of the ship more than those things which were spoken by Paul. And because the haven was not commodious to winter in, the more part advised to depart thence also, if by any means they might attain to Phoenice, and there to winter, which is an haven of Crete, and lieth toward the southwest and northwest. And when the south wind blew softly, supposing that they had obtained their purpose, loosing thence, they sailed close by Crete. But not long after there arose against it a tempestuous storm, called Euroclydon. And when the ship was caught, and could not bear up into the wind, we let her dive. Oh my goodness. And running under a certain island which is called Clauda, we had much work to come by the boat, which when they had taken up, they used helps, undergirding the ship, and fearing lest they should fall into the quicksands, strake sail, and so were driven. And we being exceedingly tossed with a tempest, if I was in a congregation right now, I'd say exceedingly tossed with a tempest. The next day they lightened the ship. And the third day we cast out with our own hands the tackling of the ship. And when neither sun nor stars in many days appeared, and no small tempest lay on us, all hope that we should be saved was taken away. Okay? But long after abstinence, Paul stood forth in the midst of them and said, Sirs, ye should have hearkened unto me, and have not loosed from Crete, and to have gained this harm and loss. And now I exhort you to be of good cheer, for there shall be no loss of any man's life among you, but of the ship. For there stood by me this night the angel of God, whose I am, and whom I serve, saying, Fear not, Paul, thou must be brought before Caesar, and lo, God hath given thee all them that sail with thee. Wherefore, sirs, be of good cheer, for I believe God, that it shall be even as it was told to me. Howbeit we must cast upon a certain island. And when the 14th night was come, and we were driven up and down in Adria, about midnight the shipmen deemed that they drew near to some country, and sounded, and found it 20 fathoms. And when they had gone a little further, they sounded again, and found it 15 fathoms. Then, fearing lest we should have fallen upon rocks, they cast 4 anchors out of the stern, and wished for the day. And as the shipmen were about to flee out of the ship, when they had let down the boat into the sea, under color as though they would have cast anchors out of the foreship, Paul said to the centurion, to the soldiers, except these abide in the ship, ye cannot be saved. Then the soldiers cut off the ropes of the boat and let her fall off. And when the day was coming on, Paul besought them all to take meat, saying, this day is the 14th day that ye have tarried, and continued fasting, and have taken nothing. Wherefore I pray ye take some meat, for this is for your health, for there shall not any hair fall from the head of any of you. And when he had thus spoken, he took bread, and gave thanks to God in presence of them all. And when he had broken it, he began to eat. Then they were all of good cheer, and they also took some meat. And we were all in the ship 216 souls. And when they had eaten enough, they lightened the ship, and cast out the wheat into the sea. And when it was day, they knew not the land, but they discovered a certain creek with a shore, into which they were minded, if it were possible, to thrust in the ship. And when they had taken up the anchors, and committed themselves unto the sea, they loosed the rudder bands, and hoisted up the mainsail to the wind, and made toward shore. And falling into a place where 2 seas meet, they ran the ship aground. And the forepart stuck fast, and remained unmovable, but the hinder part was broken with the violence of the waves. And the soldiers' counsel was to kill the prisoners, lest any of them should swim out and escape. But the centurion, willing to save Paul, kept them from their purpose, and commanded that they which could swim should cast themselves first into the sea, and get to land. And the rest, some on boards, and some on broken pieces of the ship. And so it came to pass that they all escaped safe unto land. That story has so much meat in it. There's so much um, truth in it. And without getting too deep into, you know, theological history and debate about the historical accuracy of the characters and the story and all of this other stuff, I'd rather dig into the meat of it. Get into the meat of it. What is this story? What is the moral of this story? Well, first we have to, if we're going to understand it metaphysically, we really have to begin to identify with each of the characters, and really begin to um, kind of, I won't say internalize, but we've got to establish a connection in terms of being able to see ourselves in this story. You have Paul, who's been arrested for preaching the gospel according to the Bible. Um, you know, he's being arrested, and he's being taken because he's got to go testify before Caesar. He's got to go testify before Caesar of his beliefs, and he's being taken over to Italy, and he's been passed off a couple of times, but there's a centurion on the boat named Julius who, you know, is kind of, that's his man, that's his boy. And Paul, being the character that he is, he stands up, and when he feels that something is wrong, something is going on, he speaks up. And he says, I don't think this is a good idea. And in that moment, his character changes, and he kind of becomes the voice of consciousness, or the voice of your intuition, says, oh, this is a dangerous mission that we're about to go on. Because let me tell you something, there is absolutely nobody on the planet who can convince me that when they're about to make a decision that is less than ideal, when they're not living in their truth, their soul speaks up. They just ignore it. Some people ignore it so quick they don't even realize that that's what they've done, right? And we've all been that person. And so when I read from the Bible, that's really what I want you to kind of remember and let that be the basis of where I'm coming from, because it is the fact that we've all been the characters in this book. And in this story, the purpose and the moral of this story is to allow us the space to fuck up and to recover, and to teach us to learn how to recover from not doing what was best for us, even though we followed a different voice other than that first mind. And Paul in this story represents the first mind. He represents um, the higher self in this story. That part that says, if you do this, then this is going to happen, or this is not what you really want to do. That immediate voice that we're all like so directly connected to, but at the same time, like, we've been so conditioned to ignore it. Like the scripture says, the Bible says, nevertheless, the centurion believed the master and the owner of the ship more than the things which were spoken by Paul. How many of us have done our own thing, gone our own way, rather than listening to the advice not only of our spiritual leaders, because this ain't about that, but listening to the voice of our own higher inner self that says, what you doing? Uh, can't really co-sign it, but you go ahead on and do it anyway. And so then what happens is we end up making decisions. The story talks about how some soft winds began to blow, and they had, it looked like an easy passage. And so they said, we're going to set sail now. But verse 14 says, but not long after there arose it a tempestuous wind called Euroclydon. Now the Euroclydon is the east wind. You know, it is Hurricane Katrina and El Nino put together. The Euroclydon is this massive storm, according to the scriptures, according to the Bible. Massive storm. And so how that translates to us being the characters is that we literally sometimes walk into storms. We enter situations and allow ourselves to be drawn in when the voice of our soul is screaming out like, yo, let's do something else. Let's do something else. But we progressing through the story. And we being exceedingly tossed with tempest. This whole story, that's why I read all 44 verses, because this whole story really just talks about how we make bad decisions and don't listen to the voice of our highest self that is constantly speaking to us, constantly telling us this is not the way that you want to go, but okay, I'm on the boat with you. So we guess this is where we're going, this is how we're going. Because some of us like to learn the hard way, and like my tagline or whatever, like I preach to myself and let y'all listen. Some of us are hard headed. We like to learn the hard way. We need to be shown, you know. Um, but nevertheless, the wonderful thing about this story is that even though they had been advised not to take this course of action, when they took this course of action, they were still protected. And it's some people would say right here, well, that's not a license to just knowingly fuck up. But it kind of is. It's space. It's permission to go through your process the way you need to go through your process. And that, I believe, is what the metaphysics of the broken pieces are, or is. Metaphysics. Yeah, the metaphysics are. Sorry, my inner nerd. But that's what it is. The broken pieces are literally it's the space you need to go through your process, how you need to go through it. And that's what I mean by piece from pieces. Because I could also say piece by pieces. Good morning, Clover. I could also say piece by pieces, you know, because we don't get it as a whole, this whole thing called life. Peace don't come just all at one time. A lot of times we get caught up because that's what we're expecting. But peace comes in fragments, sometimes in shards. Peace comes from realizing that you're on a piece of peace, even though you were just in a storm. You still have a piece of peace. I don't even know if I'm communicating this. It is, it is what you learn from examining the so-called chaos of your life and using what is good to rebuild. That is peace from pieces. It is understanding that what brought you here may not all be useful in your now, but there is some good, some usefulness somewhere in it, or else it wouldn't have been able to bring you over. And that thing that brings us peace, that creative charge, that, uh, that professional, uh, uh, go get it, go get it, that drive. That's what I'm trying to say. That professional drive. Whatever that thing is that brings you peace, working out, creating, spending time with your children, whatever it is, making business moves, doing business, whatever it is that brings you peace, the winds of life are absolutely going to blow. But you got to understand that even if you are stripped down to nothing, there's always a piece of peace because we are never without connection. It is just about our ability to charge it and expand it and use it and manifest with that connection. So even when the storms of life will blow, they seem to come and go, and your whole life may have fallen apart. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. 7 years ago, I was on the path to be a completely different person. I was preaching. Um, I had my own ministry. I had my own. I was married. Well, I was going through a divorce at the time, but I was married. I had a job. Had all of these things. Getting my hair done twice a week, my nails done twice a week. Walking around in high heels everywhere I go. I was about, I don't know. Um, I was about, shoot. I was wearing a size 18, 20, or 22 at my largest, size 22. But I was this person, you know, and slowly but surely, one thing after another, my life just began to be stripped down. First, all my stuff got put out, with, you know, and then all my stuff got auctioned off at the storage, and you know, then you know. One thing led to another, and then depression really began to set in, and I left the church, and then my mama got cancer, and then, I mean, it was just literally, and then bad relationship choices. I won't say bad relationship choices, but relationship choices that really continued that stripping process. Um, and it was just one thing after another, but it was all to bring me to where I had to get to, because the whole point of this particular story is that Paul had to be delivered to Rome to testify before Caesar. He had to go. And so when you think about that in terms of how we relate to the scriptures, we each have a purpose that cannot be thwarted. If Jesus' purpose was to die on the cross, Paul's purpose was to testify before Caesar about his faith and about his, preaching and stuff. Okay? So this was his purpose. He was being delivered unto his purpose, and it is often uh, the thing that delivers us into our purpose is often the thing that strips us down completely. The process. That process of stripping down is so that we can be initiated. Oh, Tokoza. The white butterfly came through. It's so that we can be initiated. The priests in the Old Testament had to be stripped down. All priesthood that I know of, including my own tradition, you have to be stripped down in front of the elder priests, the high priests, the chief priests, literally, physically, and also your life. It is a very simple, I mean, it being as an initiate anyway. It's not a lot of frills, because it's about stripping away all of the things that you don't need anymore. It's about releasing all of the conditioning and the way I've been raised, and what I've been through, and same old stories. It's about releasing all of that, the shame, the guilt, the fear, releasing all of it, and really just recognizing that if you needed more to get over, you would have had more to get over. That's just how powerful you are. You survived. And so this is where peace comes from, when you allow that truth to, because some of you may say, well, all I got, from, I don't know how I made it. If you sit down and think about it for a second and allow yourself to accept the fact that, okay, yeah, I may have made a decision that made my journey hard, but I'm still protected and I'm still here because I still have a purpose. And it was a lesson, and there's nothing that can thwart me from my lesson. Nothing that can thwart me from my Tokoza. Nothing that can thwart me from my purpose. The ship that brings you over may fall apart, but you're going to survive. You're surviving. You're not only surviving, you are breaking the cycle of survival, and you are thriving. your spiritual self, your physical self, your natural self, your sexual self, all of you made it over on what looked like broken pieces. The the wonderful thing that I love about I love art. I love all types of art. And um, I love mosaics. I think mosaics are amazing to be able to take pieces, broken pieces, or what I would call disparate pieces, pieces that really don't really have any relationship to each other, and to put them, to rearrange them into making a beautiful image. I love that with stained glass windows. I love that with, like pool tiles. I mean, I love mosaics. And the wonderful thing about life is that that's really what it is. Because storms come, whether we create them or whether we're connected with someone else's storm or whatever the situation, even in nature, storms come. It's muggy as hell out here right now because it's been storming for the past 3 days. Storms come. It is part of nature's way of releasing and reviving and refreshing herself. We all have storms, personal storms. And what this story really teaches, in my opinion, in my and Losie's opinion, is allowing space for the storm. Allowing the storm to come, recognizing that yes, it's about being accountable for the role you play in being in your storm, and finding peace from that. And finding peace from that, you know? Because hello, hello. It is very interesting. Verse 43 says, but the centurion willing to save Paul, because there are people who are always sent to you on your journey, along your journey, who got your back. Your ancestors send them to you. And even though the centurion didn't listen to Paul in the beginning, he had enough respect for Paul. And you got to see yourself and see those around you and really see who's down for you during your process. That's another way that you find peace from pieces, is by seeing who's there for you, seeing them, seeing the people who are in your life. If you notice, Paul never shamed Paul never shamed the centurion for not listening to him. He said you should have listened, but he never, he didn't make him feel bad. There's nothing in the text about that, right? So you got, again, relating that back to ourselves, Paul representing the higher self. The higher self doesn't shame you. So if you feel shame, if you feel guilt, if you feel bad, if you feel negative about the fact that you made a mistake, or not even a mistake, because as you see, they survived. So as Morpheus told Neo or Trinity in the Matrix, I think it was part 2, when they were talking to the Merovingian, he said, no, things could not have gone any other way. She said, how do you know? He said, because we are still alive. He repeats that theme in the I think it's the second one again. We are still here. So the fact that you survived means that it couldn't have gone any other way. Therefore, you got to think, or as Mom Kulu would say, respect. You've got to look again at the situation that you say, oh, it was just so terrible. Oh, and my life fell apart. Maybe the life needed to fall apart. I know mine did. My life needed to fall apart. My life absolutely needed to be deconstructed. And I got to a place where I was willing to let that happen. I was willing to let that happen. You understand? And being willing to let that happen and giving into the process and really not fighting it. I mean, I went into depression because I didn't understand it. I didn't understand what was happening to me. I didn't understand what was going on with my life. I had no clue of who I was, or what my purpose was, or why I was, I was just, I didn't understand it, but my soul knew. And there was this chasm between my soul and my mind where I couldn't really connect the two, what my soul knew and what my mind was really trying to grasp a hold of, because the mind has sometimes difficulty letting go of the perceived reality of the world that we live in, and allowing spirit to take over. But that's what depression did for me. It got me to a point where there was no more fight in me. It had to break me down all the way. It had to break me down to my lowest common denominator. It had to completely just remove everything. Like, everything began to be confronted, and I now know that that was my Amalozi, my ascended ancestors and spirit guides, and my Lozi, my chief guides, who were really beginning to pull on my soul to heal the brokenness that I felt was in my mind. And it all came, oh, Tokoza, that's the third butterfly I've seen. Um, it was really this process of being tossed. I mean, if anybody deals with anxiety, you know what it feels like after you go through like a panic attack, or something like that. You literally feel like you were just in a hurricane. Like, physically, you feel like you were standing outside in in hurricane winds, and you were just being beaten by, you know, the storm and the winds and the water, and it was just stinging your face, and it just, your body is tired and you're exhausted, and your mind is like whipped around like eggs in a bowl, is what it feels like after like a panic attack. But when you when I began to look at that in a different way, and understood my energy and my power, and I began to, and I'm still learning. I'm still, that's what this whole process is for. I'm still learning how to tap into that, and how to really, embody that on a regular and consistent basis. But when that energy comes, and it it feels like the shoreline, the waters of the shoreline pulling back in preparation for a tsunami. And like I was sharing with my god sister, we, what comes up in a tsunami, like the debris that comes up in a tsunami, is from the ocean floor. Like, that's the power of that wave. And so it has to retract. And when I understood that I am not just the wave, but the ocean itself, because everything that's in the ocean is in a drop of water from the ocean. And so everything that is in the universe is in me. And so when I began to understand that, and really, and more and more, day by day, I'm not saying that I got a grasp on it. I'm just saying, when I made the decision to really use that information and allow that information to travel from my mental down into my spiritual and in my soul, and really, really, you know, dig into it, or get into it, as my Bible would say. Um, it's been life changing, because it has allowed me to tap into a place of peace that is rock steady, that is grounded, and I'm able to watch other people's storms and not be in the storm myself. I'm as an empath, you know, what they would call an empath, a highly sensitive person, someone who feels and picks up and often sometimes processes the emotions of other people. Being grounded is so important because being grounded is what allows you to connect with the rhythms of nature. And nature doesn't fret. I said that in my last video. Nature doesn't fret. Nature don't stress out. Nature don't panic. Nature just is. And it is very important if we're going to be able to look at the pieces of our life and recreate peace from what the storm seemingly destroyed. Because destruction and rebirth are just but two sides of the same coin, you know? You know? So being able to look at the wreckage and take what's good and discard what's not, let go and rebuild. That's how you get peace from pieces. You realize that anything that you quote unquote lost, you never needed in the first place, or it was only something that you needed temporarily. There's an ebb and a flow and a rhythm to everything within the universe. Things come and they go. It is the nature of things to do that, including people. It is the nature. People come, people go. But it also is about allowing space for you to feel what you feel when you feel it. You know, no, this is a very balanced message. We're not saying, you know, when I say we, I mean my ancestors and I, we're not saying that, you know, it's not going to hurt, that it's not going to cry, that you're not going to cry. As a matter of fact, you knew in the beginning that it was going to hurt. You knew in the beginning that you was probably going to shed a tear or two before you even entered into that situation, but you did it anyway because deep down inside, you knew that you could survive it. So when we begin to panic and when we begin to freak out because the winds are coming and because the uh, the winds are blowing and the water is crashing, it reminds me of the story of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. The character of Jesus in the Bible had been preaching for 3.5 years about what his purpose was, how he came to do this and came to save that and came to free this and came to do that, and that the Son of Man was going to be like a sign, like Jonas in the belly of the whale for 3 days, so must the Son of Man be in the earth for 3 days and all this. I mean, he said it. But when it came time for him to do it, he cried and said, please, Master, if it be thy will, let this cup pass from me. How many of us can relate to that? Deep inside, we know the truth about any given situation that we're entering ourselves into consciously. Deep inside, we know, but we like to ignore and play and act like we don't know. And I'm going to tell you, my Mkulu said it to me, and I'll probably repeat it until the day I die. You play yourself when you act like you don't know what you already know, what you really know. When you know, you play yourself. But even when you play yourself, your ancestors are always there to let you know that because you have a purpose and because you set out on this journey in the first place, even though you might have made a mistake, or I don't really like the word mistake, it is kind of black and white, but you made a certain kind of decision that took you down a certain path. We still here with you. We in the boat with you. We are with you. And so you can have peace in knowing that if we tell you you're going to survive, that you're going to make it, that you're going to achieve your goal, you absolutely have to hold on to that peace so you can have peace, so you can manifest peace. All wars in the world are manifestations of our inability to make peace with ourselves. I won't say inability. Let me scratch that. I would say unwillingness or ignorance as to how to make peace with ourselves. Like, we are at constant war with ourselves. We are constantly beating ourselves up, holding ourselves to the impossible standard of perfection, of the myth of perfection. Trying to be like this or be like that instead of just being who we are and not judging the pieces of our lives, but using those pieces to create an even more beautiful story, a more honest narrative, a more truthful relationship with ourselves, with our higher selves, with our ancestors, with the universe itself, with the omniverse. We are so hard on ourselves. But the higher self don't make you feel bad. Hell, my ancestors have never made me feel bad. They have never. Mm-mm. Now, I've had moments where I've had some real moments with my ancestors, and not understanding and everything, kind of just letting off. But they've always dealt with me in love. Sternness, when they speak, they speak, they speak. But I've never left I've never, come out of meditation with my ancestors feeling bad, feeling sorry for myself, or feeling anything. It's always an infusion of love and an infusion of power and a reawakening and a reminder. And so one of the 31 ways to surrender, that I post on Instagram, hashtag 31 ways to surrender, is, um, don't judge your process or trust your process. Don't judge your process. You are where you are because it's where you need to be. You are where you are. You are who you are. You are the way that you are. You have to accept all of that and don't say, oh, I hate this part of myself. It's a meme and it might be cliche, but it's the truth that you cannot hate yourself into a version of yourself that you love. And hate is really not hate. Hate is really misplaced adoration, misplaced devotion. It's love turned on its head. The opposite of love is apathy. It is not giving a fuck. Walking by a homeless person and you got a burger in your hand and eating that motherfucker and not giving a fuck. So it is imperative if we are going to establish a practice of peace to shift our perspective and ground ourselves in the truth that we are always protected, we are always surrounded, even when we make decisions that seem to be counterproductive. The ancestors, your higher self, the creator have a way, the universe has a way of shifting things so that you can still learn the lesson and that you will survive it. If survival is on your mind, because the Bible says, but Paul the centurion, willing to save Paul, kept them from their purpose and commanded that they which could swim should cast themselves first into the sea and get to land. You have to practice, or you have to participate in your own deliverance sometimes. We cannot be passive observers all the time. Sometimes we got to dive head in if we want to find, if we want to get to a place of peace. We got to dive into choppy waters. Why? Because we can swim. I don't want to get wet. Well, you don't want to survive so that you can thrive. You can't thrive without learning how to survive. And peace comes from knowing that because you know how to survive, because you know that you can swim, because you know that you know how to hold on and stay afloat to even the smallest piece of the ship, because you had enough in you to make it over. It don't matter if you swam over or if you held on to a piece of the ship. If you were on dry land, you made it, and you are here now. And you are still on your way to purpose, and you are still on your way to destiny. And no, you don't look like, a lot of people say, I don't look like what I've been through. Sometimes you look like what you've been through, because what you went through was, sometimes you still bear the scars. You may not look like it physically, but in your emotional reactions to certain triggers, and in the way that you communicate when certain energy is around, and the way that you behave, or whatever, in your behaviors, your patterns, your behaviors, your thoughts, your ideas, that's where the scars show up. But even in all of that, you are still on the other side. And from that, you can build peace. You can let it all go and say, you can't mourn the loss of the ship. You can't mourn the loss of the ship. You got to rejoice in the fact that you are alive and you are here. Yes, certain relationships fell apart. Yes, certain ideas were deconstructed. Yes, you may have gone from sleeping on a California king to sleeping on the floor, praise God. But you are still here. Tokoza. You are still here. So like I said in the beginning, this story about Paul being delivered to Rome to testify before Caesar and encountering a storm that he said was going to happen, but they didn't listen. They got tricked by their own ego because a soft, gentle wind came. And it's about the fact that Paul representing in this story the voice of your higher self, the voice of your ancestors, the voice of your intuition and your spirit. He says, even though we just encountered a storm, the ship is going to be destroyed, but no lives are going to be lost. And right there, you can put a praise on that, because that our ancestors are always with us. And when you have been set on a course for purpose, which everyone on this planet has a purpose that they are here to accomplish, your entire life can be and will be dismantled by the very decisions that you make, because your soul and your ancestors have a way. They have a way of you make a decision, but it's you say, God, this is against my best interest, but I'm doing it anyway, because in the short term it may be in your best interest, but it's absolutely the thing that is going to thrust you forward. And I'm almost done because my battery is running low on my phone. It is the thing that's going to thrust you forward. Piece from pieces. You to know that you don't have to look at your life and feel like it was a waste. You don't have to look at what you've been through and feel like, oh my God, this is all I am. This is, you don't have to feel bad. You don't have to, but you don't have to hold on to it either. That you can let the former self go and begin to move on into the next phase of your purpose, the next phase of your journey. And that's peace. And knowing that you know how to survive a storm. And knowing also, more than that, that you know to listen to your intuition, to listen to the voice of your higher self when it speaks next time. Every storm that we walk into because we ignore the voice of God within us is really a lesson in fine tuning the ear, the spiritual ear, to hear and understand and obey the voice and recognize its own voice and follow its own voice. That's what I mean by trust yourself. When you trust yourself, when you know yourself, it's really the God in you speaking out through you, you listening to that voice, you articulating that voice, you expressing that voice, and that same resonance coming back to you. And you looking at what you created as God saying, this is good. So you can't judge the process, you can't judge your pieces, you can't hate your pieces. It's who you are, but it's not all of who you are. You can use those to build. Thank you, Takoza, for you who joined in. And this is, these are only going to get better. Going to get more accustomed to teaching in this way. Um, and it's only going to get better. So I thank you for rocking with me. Um, tell a neighbor, tell a friend, you know, they can kind of fast forward through maybe about 15 minutes. And I may go in and edit this because, there was I was just kind of waiting. Um, and so it's like I won't say dead space, but, it's like me not really saying anything. So I don't know. I don't have a production team. I don't have any of that. I don't really have any experience doing this. I'm more of I'm used to getting up in front of people and being able to feed off people's energy, in the room. So thank you for bearing with me. Thank you for listening. Um, Continue to watch and subscribe and everything, and I'll keep posting and we'll keep sharing. And until we talk again, Tokoza, Tokozani.